President Trump calling on Iran to make peace after authorizing a strike on the country's 3 nuclear sites. Our panel is here now. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. Scott Jennings, I actually want to start with you. You've spent time with President Trump in recent months. He had come out late last week and said that he would decide within 2 weeks. And then we saw events unfold very quickly from there. What can you help us understand about the president's decision-making process here? Because certainly, I think there are many in MAGA world who may have been surprised that he did this. But tell us what you know.
Why would you be surprised? I mean, Donald Trump has been clear-eyed and full of resolve about the Iranian threat for 20 years. He has always said you can't have peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon. And I would also say that my observations of him over the last few months are that things are running quite smoothly over in the White House and at the Pentagon. Look what happened. The deception that was involved here, no leaks, the resolve, the precision, execution. We have a commander-in-chief right now who is decisive and who knows how to operate a government and operate a military operation with absolute precision. The level of deterrence that this will put throughout the world, that our enemies should be perceiving, is very, very high. This is a great day for this president, and it's a great day for the world because he's making us safe for Western civilization.
Well, I think there are a lot of questions here. First of all, why did Trump, the whole reason why we're in this situation is because he withdrew from the nuclear deal in the first place. And now he's trying to bring Iran back to the table, and they wouldn't do that, and so he decided to move forward with these strikes. But this was his doing in the first place. Obama had a deal. He withdrew from it. He withdrew from the deal, and now he's trying to get back into something very, very similar. The second piece of this is I think there's two real questions about where are we going next. Whether or not this is going to lead into a war, and whether or not, and Iran has already indicated that they do plan on retaliating, and Trump has said and threatened that he will then escalate as well. And I think the third question is a legal part of this, which is whether this was constitutional and whether or not they needed approval from Congress.
Yeah, look, Kasie, we're clearly in the new Middle East right now, and there are so many unanswered questions to Xochitl's point. And I will say I agree with this entirely. Look, Donald Trump got out of the Iran nuclear deal, which was verifiably preventing this exact moment from happening. Now he owns it. This is his decision. We could not tolerate, I will say, we could not tolerate Iran's nuclear program where it was right now. And it was a courageous decision. And thank goodness we have the military that we have to execute, as Scott said, the way it did. But now we're in this new Middle East, and these questions need to be answered. Congress needs to start asking harder questions, and we need to know how our forces will be protected.
Rebeccah, you obviously an expert on security policy. When you think about the Iranians and what they are potentially looking at doing next, what is the calculus there? I mean, we're just talking with John Bolton about this. I mean, what do you expect, and what are the risks to the U.S. from that?
Well, the Iranian regime is severely militarily wounded. So I think part of the calculation for President Trump was, are we going to have clear air superiority if the United States is going to go in and directly involve itself militarily? The Israelis provided that for us. They took out a lot of the Iranian launchers. They took out a lot of the Iranian air defenses. And so Iran is extremely vulnerable. I mean, you saw General Kane even say that the United States, when we launched this air campaign, there was no indication that the Iranians even saw us. There was no attempt to even shoot down anything that the United States was doing. So I think if you were going to see some kind of defensive action on the part of Iran, you would have already seen it by now. A couple options they have. There's about 40,000 U.S. troops deployed in the Middle East. Clearly, Iran's going to try to threaten them like they did after President Trump took out Soleimani during his first term. But that attack was essentially a failure when the Iranians tried that as well. Or they could threaten to close down the Strait of Hormuz. But that, of course, comes with severe consequences. If the United States has all of the momentum, it would be a dire mistake for the Iranians to try that, because I think the response from the United States would be overwhelming and successful.
This, of course, is splitting both parties. We touched on yours, Scott, but Xochitl, Congressman Josh Gottheimer posted this on X. He says this, quote, "Tonight, the United States took critical and decisive action to protect America. This is not a Democratic or Republican issue. Dealing with the Iranian threat is central to America's national security. The world is safer because of the actions of our brave service members." How widespread do you think the sentiment is going to be? I mean, historically, there's been a lot of support for Israel in the Democratic Party. Absolutely. That has been, quite different since, in recent months. But how far do you think that goes?
So I think that there are a lot of questions that are being raised by Congress right now. And the reason that being raised is because normally you would need congressional approval for something like this. And I know that my friend here is laughing a little bit, but I will say,
I mean,
but I will
covered Congress for a long time, but they gave a lot of that away.
But I will say, I mean, in order for the president to take action without congressional approval, he needed to show that there was a real true threat to the United States and that the strike would not cause escalation. The problem with this is that normally you would have a group of lawyers from all across the agencies that actually would make these determinations. Trump did away with that at the beginning of this administration. So it's unclear what type of legal advice Trump was getting. Department of Defense usually puts out a statement and says what the legality is of any strike that the president is taking without congressional action. Here, we have not heard from DOD what is happening there. So what will be critical in the weeks to come is Congress must see the underlying intelligence about how they were in direct threat and how the U.S. needed to respond without congressional approval. But as of right now, I have not seen that.
You're arguing that after 46 years of the Iranian regime killing Americans, threatening Americans, saying over and over and over again, death to America, that maybe they were just didn't mean it, that they're fiery but mostly peaceful Iranian butchers? I mean, I don't understand. This is a righteous strike.
But what you had,
not exactly the
well, you also had this mix. You also had a clear opportunity where American troops were going to be the least amount of danger for us to carry out a successful attack. So you have the combination of, as Scott said, of a direct threat on the part of the Iran regime, very close to having a weaponized nuclear capability. To take that off the table brings greater peace and security to our troops deployed and to Americans here at home.
All right. We unfortunately have to go. We are going to see several of you back here at noon. Rebeccah, thank you very much for being with us. The big outstanding questions after President Trump strikes Iran's nuclear sites. We'll be back after a quick break.
Empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives.
That was Vice President J.D. Vance earlier this morning. He's been a skeptic of military involvement in the Middle East, but he's praising the president's decision this morning. Our panel is here to discuss. And, Scott Jennings actually thought it was an interesting choice to have the vice president, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense with the president last night when he addressed the country. Typically in these moments, or often in these moments, it's only the president. But obviously, the vice president has been out there trying to give some credibility with the MAGA base. We know that J.D. Vance is very much a skeptic of foreign intervention for President Trump in this decision-making. What do you make of what he said?
Well, I think it was important for them all to be out there to show absolute unity and resolve across the entire government, and that's what they were doing. So that was a good public relations move. I mean, the fact is we have a strong president, a decisive president, and the most lethal military in the world, and there's a huge difference between what's going on in Iran right now and what happened in Iraq over 20 years ago. So I think having J.D. Vance out is great. I think having Marco Rubio out is great. I think the president bringing his whole national security team out and showing that, the entire government here was operating in lockstep with great precision, great resolve, and the execution of this was flawless. It ought to give the American people, a lot of confidence in the competence in our government right now as compared to what we had in previous administration.
Rebeccah, what do you think the risk here is that America hasn't learned the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan in this context?
Well, I think President Trump, whatever we can actually see from his first term, too, what his impulses have been are clear military objectives that are scoped, and he has no interest in doing regime change operations from the top down, imposing them on people who do not have the civil society to welcome regime change. And so President Trump, you can see that during his first administration, he had scoped actions to take out ISIS, to take out those Russian mercenaries in Syria, to respond to Assad's chemical weapons in Syria and that attack back against them. So I think the lesson is if you're going to go in and use military force to make sure you have a clear military objective and then just be resolved in your mind not to have mission creep and to get out when you're done. And that's going to be, I think, a primary lesson here with dealing with the Iran regime.
All makes sense. But, Joel, as we know, there's always unintended consequences.
Tremendous unintended consequences. And, look, I got to say the line by the vice president does not do anything to instill confidence in me and in Democrats to say that they can support this kind of action. You don't need to call previous American commanders-in-chief stupid to justify your own actions. And there needs to be an explanation, a clear explanation as to what comes next. Look, I support the action last night. I think it was the right call because this is the moment in time where we needed to take this stand. But this administration needs to be clear about how to protect us from the threats that are now on our doorstep.
Yeah, and also I just want to point out that there was a poll that came out this week that said 60% of Americans thought the U.S. should not get involved in this conflict, and 53% of Republicans said that they do not want the U.S. to join Israel in this war. I will say that the president, during his inauguration speech, promised to be a peacemaker. He essentially said that we should not be getting into wars. He pointed that out in his speech, and he has been very, very clear that he wanted to end conflicts in Ukraine and would overall not get into unnecessary wars. And so I think the risk that Donald Trump certainly has here and the implications of this is that they do escalate, they do attack Americans abroad, and that we end up seeing a back and forth and war moving forward.
This is not an escalation. This is a de-escalation.
Well, Trump promised escalation.
This is not
Trump promised escalation.
Ever Iranian bunker busting bombs is not an escalation.
Because she said President Trump promised us peace. I ask you, can we have peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon?
Well, we had a deal, and
you're litigating the past.
I'm not litigating the past.
Can we have peace if they have a nuclear weapon?
We had a deal. He's trying to get back into that deal. And he withdrew from that.
They were violating
and not only that, now he's trying to have another deal.
Bribery and appeasement does not work with terrorism.
Let me hold on for one second. I just want to kind of draw this conversation back and ask a big picture one, because I think it's something that a lot of Americans are asking. Is America at war with Iran right now, Scott?
No, we're not. We had a precision military strike to keep them from getting nuclear weapons. We're at war with a terrorist regime having nuclear weapons, but not with the Iranian people, who, by the way, should take this opportunity to throw these butchers out, in my opinion.
Yes or no?
I do, and the president has said, he's made that clear, and he's also said that we would escalate if they potentially strike U.S. Embassies or anything like that, and I believe that they have said that they will.
Rebeccah?
It depends on how the Iran regime responds. The Iran regime has been at war with the United States since 1979. President Trump just took decisive action to end that war. Now we're going to see how the Iranians respond. It's my hope, obviously, that they stand down. Otherwise, I would just disagree. I do not think that escalation is our biggest problem. Okay. I think that ceding escalation to the adversary is our biggest problem. And one thing that we have to learn from President Biden's handling of Ukraine and Russia as well is if your fear is escalation constantly, you cede escalation control to the adversary. So I actually think this was an escalation, but my hope is that we escalate to compel the adversary to now back down, because we have the advantage, they do not.
Do you think we're at war?
There's a key word that's missing in all of this, which is the word diplomacy. And President Trump, he has basically failed on diplomacy on Russia and Ukraine, on Gaza. We've seen those wars get worse. We are technically, we'll see this week, the War Powers Act is the justification for this action. So, yes, we have been at war. We need to find a way to de-escalate, to lock in, as he said, a diplomatic achievement here with Iran so it does not go further beyond this nuclear strike.
All right. Thank you all very much for joining us today. This obviously is a conversation that we are all going to continue to have as a nation, as a world, for quite some time to come.